May 1943. North Atlantic. West of Ireland. Inside the steel tube of a German Type 7 U-boat, the air tastes of diesel, battery acid, and sweat. Red lamps sway over valves and wet jackets. Somewhere aft, a wrench clangs against the deck grating, and every man freezes for a beat because noise carries in the Atlantic. And noise can get you killed. Oberleutnant Karl Brenner leans over the attack periscope, one eye pressed hard to the rubber cup. He is young for the command, old in the face. The convoy ahead is only a smear of silhouettes in fog and spray columns of merchantmen. Escorts weaving. Signal lamps flickering like distant insects. He has seen this before, too many times. Another convoy. The radio operator mutters, quietly, as if saying it too loudly might summon destroyers. Brenner doesn't answer. He keeps counting hulls. 1, 3, 6, 12. The Atlantic had once felt open to them. In the early years, men like Brenner had been taught that tonnage was the key. Sink enough merchant ships, and Britain starves. The war bends, and then breaks. Cargo was the blood in Allied veins. You didn't need to sink battleships if you could empty the freighters. You only had to keep cutting. The doctrine was simple. The execution was brutal. And, for a time, it worked. But now, as Brenner studies the dark procession through the spray, the same thought returns, the one none of them says aloud. They keep coming. Not just convoys, ships, endless ships. He tracks one through the periscope wake. A plain cargo vessel, boxy, workmanlike, no grace to it. A single stack, a raised bridge, masts and booms, low in the water with cargo, not fast, not elegant. Yet it is exactly the kind of ship his crew keeps seeing again and again, the kind that replaced the ones they sank last month. And the month before that. One of the watchstanders whispers, "Liberty." The word hangs in the control room. Brenner lowers the scope a fraction, jaw tightening. They had started hearing the name in fragments from intercepted traffic, from intelligence briefings, from wardroom talk in Lorient. Liberty ships, American cargo ships, built fast, crude. Some officers called them ugly, slow, but there were more of them every patrol. The sonar operator raises a hand. Escort screws. Portside. Fast. Closing and opening. Destroyer escort. Maybe a corvette, too. Brenner can hear it now himself in the hull, the layered tremor of convoy war merchant screws pulsing steady. Escorts cutting across the pattern like wolves around cattle. He pulls back from the periscope and glances at the chart table. The North Atlantic is marked with grease pencil routes and convoy estimates. It used to look like opportunity. Now it looks like arithmetic. How many torpedoes forward, he asks. 4 loaded, 1 in tube 5 aft. Reloads secure. 4 forward fish against a convoy of dozens. Even a good night attack, 2 ships. Maybe 3 if everything is perfect, no longer feels like victory. It feels like scratching paint from a factory wall. And that, more than fear, is what unsettles him. Because while Brenner and men like him stalked convoys in the Atlantic, American shipyards were doing something the Kriegsmarine had not fully imagined. They were turning shipbuilding into production line warfare. Liberty ships were designed as emergency cargo vessels to answer wartime shortages, adapted from a British Ocean type and simplified for mass construction in U.E.T. yards. The first, SS Patrick Henry, had launched in September 1941. After that, they multiplied. Thousands would be built, more than 700 by war's end in shipyards across the United States. Brenner doesn't know all those numbers, but he feels them. He has felt them in the convoy columns, growing denser, in the radio traffic, in the stubborn fact that no matter how many ships are sunk, there is always another line on the horizon. The U-boat rocks gently. Condensation trickles along the bulkhead. A machinist wipes his hands on a rag black with oil. Someone murmurs a curse in Hamburg dialect. Someone else fingers a pocket photograph and pretends not to. Depth, Brenner asks. Periscope depth. Sea state rough. He nods. Rough seas help and hurt. Harder to spot a periscope. Harder to shoot well. Harder to live. He rises again to the scope. The nearest merchantman rolls in the swell. Bow lifting. Grey water exploding over her forecastle. In daylight she would look almost ordinary, but through a U-boat periscope in Atlantic weather, she looks like a machine built for one purpose only to cross, unload, and return. There is no romance to her, no pride of line, just work. Liberty. The Americans were welding them in sections. Brenner had heard prefabricated parts, assembly line methods, labor pulled in by the tens of thousands. Even the rumors sounded industrial build times falling from months to weeks. Yards launching ships daily, in the control room of U-96 or U-552. Such stories might once have sounded like propaganda. Out here in 1943, they sound like the truth. It's wartime shipbuilding slashed Liberty construction times from about 230 days at the start to about 39 days by mid-1943, and the highly publicized SS Robert E. Peary was launched in roughly 4 days and 15.5 hours at Richmond, at peak pace in 1943. Liberty ships were being launched at about 3 per day. 3 per day. Brenner steadies the scope on another freighter. He imagines a yard in America he has never seen cranes. Sparks. Steel plates. Women in overalls. Black smoke over a river. Whistles blowing at shift change. He imagines one ship sliding down the ways, while another is already taking shape behind it. He imagines men with clipboards and stopwatches measuring the war in hours. Not patrols. The convoy signal lamp flashes. An escort turns. Brenner sees the bow wave first. Then the dark shape of the warship cutting across the merchant columns like a knife. The convoy is alert. Better radar now. Better escorts. Better air cover than before. And behind all of it, more freighters. More hulls. More cargo. The Atlantic campaign had always been a contest of tonnage. But now, for the first time, Brenner feels the balance tipping beneath him, not in one battle, not in one torpedo miss, but in the cold logic of production. Liberty and tanker construction had been pushed forward specifically to replace losses from submarine attack. And the Allies' answer to the U-boat threat was not just escorts and aircraft, but sheer industrial replacement on a scale Germany could not match. Even the National Park Service summary of wartime shipbuilding ties those ships directly to replacing losses from submarine threats like German U-boats, which had sunk thousands of merchant vessels. Herr Kaluan, the torpedo officer, says. Brenner lowers the scope. He does not speak for a moment. Around him, every man waits for the firing solution, for the attack order, for the old confidence to return. Instead, he says, very quietly, we fire on the lead column, one spread, then we dive deep and turn away. No one objects, no one asks why not press harder, because all of them know, even if they sink one tonight, another will be built, and another, and another. Brenner grips the periscope handles and brings the convoy back into view as the Atlantic heaves around them. For the first time on this patrol, he is not looking at ships. He is looking at a factory horizon. The torpedoes leave with a hard metallic cough. 1, 2, 3, each departure felt through the hull before it is heard. In the bow compartment, men count under their breath. Brenner keeps his eye to the periscope, tracking the white wakes slicing toward the convoy column. The first freighter vanishes behind a wall of spray. Then the Atlantic flashes. A column of orange fire punches up into the night, brief and violent, throwing jagged light across rain and smoke. Men in the control room flinch at the glow through the periscope tube reflection. Somewhere above, steel plates are tearing open. Cargo. Foil. Timber, whatever she carries, is now in the water. Treffer, the torpedo officer whispers. Hit. A second detonation follows, deeper and duller. Not a clean kill, maybe a stern strike, maybe a crippled ship dropping out of line. Brenner does not wait to admire the damage. Down, 50 meters, silent running. The order snaps the boat into motion. Planes angle, valves hiss, the deck tips under their boots. Men move in practiced silence. Shoulders brushing in the narrow red light. The diesels are cut, and the electric motors take over with a lower, tighter hum. Above them, the convoy continues, and then the escorts begin to turn. That is the part every U-boat man knows in his bones. The hunt after the shot. The first pings arrive through the hull like hammer taps on a church bell. Sonar, regular, searching, closer each time. The sound operator, headphones clamped tight, raises 2 fingers. One escort approaching fast, another crossing behind. Brenner stands over the chart table, one hand braced, listening to the pings and the creak of the pressure hull. The men's faces are slick with sweat despite the cold. Condensation beads on pipes and drips onto shoulders and notebooks. The air is already growing stale. In a U-boat under attack, time stops being measured in minutes and becomes measured in breaths. Course 210, Brenner says quietly. Keep her steady. No heroic speeches, no dramatic gestures, just a low voice and numbers. The first pattern of depth charges detonates off the port quarter. The boat jumps hard. Lights flicker, and a shower of rust dust spills from a seam overhead. Someone is thrown against a valve wheel and bites back a cry. A gauge needle shivers. Another blast follows. Closer, and the hull gives a deep groan that every man aboard feels in his teeth. For a few seconds, no one moves. Then the chief petty officer says, almost calmly, battery compartment secure, no flooding here. A machinist echoes from aft, engines still responding. Brenner nods once, but his jaw tightens. This is what the Atlantic has become in 1943, not just a hunting ground, but a trap that grows tighter each month. The escorts are more aggressive, better coordinated. Their radar can find a surfaced boat at night. Their sonar teams are more practiced. Aircraft range is extending. The U-boat arm still strikes. But every patrol now feels costlier than the last. Another spread of charges rolls beneath them like thunder under the sea. The boat pitches. A lamp goes dark and comes back. The radio operator crosses himself so quickly it is almost invisible. Brenner says nothing. But he is thinking of the numbers again, not his own. But the wars. 1 freighter hit tonight. Perhaps 2. A tactical success on paper. A report to transmit if they survive. Tonnage sunk. Torpedoes expended. Position grid. But what does tonnage sunk mean now, when the enemy can replace steel faster than you can sink it? Above them, somewhere in the dark, the convoy's remaining ships continue west. The escorts are doing exactly what they were built and trained to do: protect the columns, keep the cargo moving, deny the U-boats clean attacks. And behind this one convoy is another. And behind that another still. The Liberty ships are the visible part of it, the blunt grey freighters Brenner's men call ugly Americans. But the real weapon is the system behind them: standardized designs. Prefabrication, welding teams, rail delivery of parts, round-the-clock shifts, launchways operating like assembly stations. You can feel the industrial logic even from inside a submarine. The U-boat war was supposed to break Britain's lifeline. Instead, by 1943, it is colliding with the full production capacity of the United States. A louder ping, closer, escort overhead. The sound operator whispers. Brenner lifts one hand. Everyone freezes. For a moment, the only sound is the faint whine of the motors and the ticking of metal cooling and heating under pressure. Then the charges come directly above. The explosion slams through the hull like a fist. The bow drops. A pipe coupling bursts somewhere forward, spraying water across the compartment. Men lunge with rags and clamps. A second blast hits before they finish. and the lights die completely. Blackness. In the dark, you hear what fear really sounds like: breathing, boots slipping, a muttered prayer, the scrape of a wrench passed hand to hand. Emergency lights. Brenner says. The red lamps return one by one, dim and bloody. The chief reports. Minor leak secured. No major hull breach. No major hull breach. In this war, that counts as mercy. Minutes drag. The escorts sweep. Ping. Two circle. Drop. And drift. Sometimes the charges are close enough to rattle teeth. Sometimes they explode farther off. And the crew dares to hope the pattern is moving away. Brenner remains at the chart table, counting intervals, guessing escort turns, listening for screws. This is command now, less attack. More survival. At last, after what feels like an hour but maybe 20 minutes, the pings begin to fade. The sound operator waits, then says, "Contact opening." Opening. I think they're returning to convoy. No one cheers. U-boat crews learn not to celebrate too early. Brenner exhales through his nose and rubs at the bridge of it. He looks around the control room, faces grey in red light. Uniforms damp. Eyes hollow from too little sleep. Good men. Skilled men. Men who can still kill ships in the Atlantic. But even they can feel it now, the war shifting from courage and seamanship to output and replacement. When they surface hours later, the night is colder. The sky broken by clouds. The bow watch scans for aircraft while diesel fumes fill the air and the batteries begin to recharge. Brenner climbs to the bridge and looks at the sea. There is no sign of the convoy anymore. Only black water, whitecaps, and the wind. He imagines the damaged freighter behind them, burning or sinking. He imagines the convoy still moving. Then he imagines an American shipyard at dawn, cranes swinging, riveters hammering, welders in sparks. Another Liberty hull taking shape before the smoke from the last launch has cleared. That is the realization he cannot shake. The U-boats can still strike hard, but the Allies are no longer fighting ship by ship. They are fighting with a production line. Spring 1943. Richmond, California. Kaiser Shipyard No. Before sunrise. The yard is already awake. Floodlights burn over skeletal hulls. Cranes swing like black arms through steam and welding sparks. Freight cars rattle in with steel plate. Pipe, cable reels, and machinery crates. A whistle blows, and men and women in heavy gloves and canvas jackets move through the gates in streams. Lunch pails swinging, hard hats tucked under their arms. If Carl Brenner could see this place, he would understand what he had only sensed through a periscope. The Liberty ships are not reappearing by chance. They are being manufactured into existence. At a fabrication platform near the ways, Foreman Eddie Markham stands over a chalkboard schedule, cigarette wet at the corner of his mouth. He is not a naval officer. He is not a strategist. He is a yardman, broad-shouldered, exhausted, and angry at delay. Around him are teams that, 2 years earlier, would never have worked together in a shipyard at all. Former farmhands, machinists, welders from rail shops, longshoremen, women trained in accelerated wartime programs, black workers newly hired into industrial trades, older craftsmen pulled back into service, boys who lied about their age. Section B-12 is late. Eddie snaps, tapping the board. If B-12 is late, the whole line slips. A young welder wipes sweat from her brow with a sleeve and says, "Crane was tied up on the next hull. Then we free the crane." He points toward the towering shape on the ways, a Liberty hull in progress. Her blunt bow plated but still open aft. Seams glowing where welds are being laid. She is not pretty. Nobody here cares. Pretty doesn't carry ammunition to Britain. Pretty doesn't haul grain. Trucks. Aviation fuel. Locomotives. Tanks. Field hospitals. Pretty doesn't win the Atlantic. A rigger jogs up with paperwork. Prefabricated deckhouse sections are in. We can set by noon if the alignment team signs off. Eddie grabs the sheet. Scans it. Nods once. Get them staged. No waiting on my line. That phrase "my line" says everything about what has changed. Traditional shipbuilding had been a craft rhythm keel first. Hull slowly rising. Trades moving in sequence. Wartime emergency shipbuilding turns that rhythm into an industrial tempo. Liberty ships are broken into sections, built in parallel, then assembled fast. Hull plates arrive cut. Bulkheads arrive ready. Piping and fittings are staged before welders are done. The work is still hard, still dangerous, still skilled, but now it is timed. The yard sounds like a war in itself. Air hammers chatter. Winches whine. Steel drops onto blocks with bone-deep clangs. Welders flare white-blue light under face shields. Sparks blowing in orange fans across catwalks. Riveting still exists in places. But welding dominates the pace. Cutting hours and labor in ways no one in peacetime would have believed. At a nearby berth, another Liberty slides into the water under a burst of whistles and cheers. There is no long ceremony, no lingering speeches. A bottle is broken. A few hats wave. And almost immediately crews begin clearing the ways for the next hull. Launch. Reset. Build again. That is the rhythm the U-boat fleet is fighting now. A Navy lieutenant assigned to production liaison walks beside Eddie with a clipboard, trying to keep up. Washington wants updated completion estimates by tonight. Eddie doesn't stop walking. Tell Washington I'll give them ships. Estimates don't cross the Atlantic. They pass a row of workers assembling winches and cargo booms. Liberty ships are merchant workhorses, and their cargo gear matters kingposts. Booms, hatches, steam winches. All the ugly practical equipment that lets a ship load and unload anywhere from a modern dock to an improvised wartime quay. Invar. Logistics is not glamour. It is cranes and hatch covers, grease and cargo nets. A woman in a welding hood lifts her visor as Eddie approaches. We're burning through rods faster than supply, says. I know, he says. I've got another shipment coming in from Oakland by lunch. She nods and goes back to work, arc flaring bright. Nobody here talks about U-boats much. They know the headlines. They know convoy losses. Some have brothers in the Navy, sons in the Marines, husbands in bomber crews over Europe. But in the yard, the war is reduced to one brutal equation. Keep the hulls moving. Every delay in Richmond means one less ship loaded in New York. One less ship loaded in New York means one less convoy slot filled. One less convoy slot filled means fewer trucks, fewer shells, less fuel in Britain, North Africa, or the Pacific. The men in the Atlantic fire torpedoes. The men and women here answer with launch whistles. By mid-morning, a supervisor shouts for alignment checks. Crane hooks descend. A prefabricated deckhouse section hangs in the air, swaying gently, workers guiding it with tag lines while welders wait in crouched positions. The crane operator lowers by inches. Steel meets steel. Hammers ring. Chalk marks are checked. Then Eddie gives the signal. Burn it in. Torches flare. Another seam closes. Another section becomes ship. At a break table near the slipway, two workers drink coffee from dented mugs, black as engine oil. You hear that one they did in 4 days, one asks. Publicity stunt. The other says, but not dismissively, more like disbelief with respect. Still floated. Yeah, he says, staring at the hull in front of them. And that's the point. The Robert E. Peary launch has already become yard legend, not because every ship can be built that fast, but because it proves what the system can do under pressure, even if most Liberty ships take far longer than that record. The trend is the weapon weeks instead of months, repetition instead of craftsmanship, delay, scale instead of rarity. By afternoon, the wind picks up from the bay, carrying salt and smoke through the yard. Shift whistles blow again. Some crews leave. Others replace them. Night gangs file in before the daylight crews are fully out. The work never really stops. Eddie stands at the edge of the ways as the sun drops red behind cranes and rigging. He looks at the hull on his line still unfinished. Still missing fittings and paint, but unmistakably a ship. Tomorrow it will look more complete. Next week, it may launch. In another month, if all goes well, it could be in a convoy crossing the Atlantic under grey skies, rolling hard in the swell, watched through a German periscope. And if it is sunk, Eddie spits into the dust, checks his clipboard, and turns back toward the next section. Then they build another. That is the true shock waiting for men like Brenner in 1943, not that America can build ships, but that America can absorb losses and keep accelerating. The Liberty ships are not a single class of freighter to be dealt with. They are the visible output of a nation that has turned logistics into mass production and mass production into strategy. As darkness settles over Richmond, welders strike arcs under floodlights, and the yard glows like a steel city. Far away in the Atlantic, a U-boat commander counts ships in a convoy and wonders why the columns never seem to shrink. Here, the answer is screaming from every crane, every torch, every launch rail in the dark. June 1943. U-boat bunker. Lorient. Occupied France. Rain taps on concrete thick enough to survive bombs. Inside the pens and briefing rooms along the submarine base, oil, smoke and wet wool mix with the smell of stale tobacco. Crews move through the corridors with sea bags over their shoulders. Faces pale from patrol, fatigue, or hard from men about to sail again. Boots echo on damp floors. Somewhere deeper in the bunker, a diesel engine coughs to life, then steadies into a growl. Oberleutnant Karl Brenner stands at the back of her operations room, cap in hand, salt still in the seams of his jacket. His patrol report is already filed: 1 confirmed sinking, 1 probable damage, heavy escort response, forced deep, battery strain, no catastrophic damage. On paper, it reads like a competent patrol. In the room, it feels like a funeral. At the front, a senior staff officer points a stick at a wall map layered with route lines, convoy codes, and red grease pencil marks for sinkings, blue marks for losses. There are more blue marks than anyone wants to discuss. The Atlantic remains the decisive theatre, the officer says, voice clipped, formal. Enemy tonnage losses continue. However, he pauses at the word however, and every commander in the room hears the real message coming. Escort density has increased, and enemy air cover continues to expand. Radar effectiveness remains a serious problem for surfaced night attacks. Convoy routing discipline has improved. Contact reporting delays are increasing. No one speaks. Brenner studies the map. The route lines still run where they always have, but the spaces between opportunities feel narrower now. The old Wolfpack tactics depended on finding convoys, shadowing, calling in boats, striking at night on the surface with speed and surprise. But more radar-equipped escorts and patrol aircraft mean the surface is no longer the same sanctuary after dark. Then the officer taps a second chart. Merchant replacement remains high. A low murmur crosses the room, not loud enough to be mutiny, only enough to be human. Another commander, older, with tired eyes and an iron cross ribbon, says, "Hi, they are replacing faster than we can report sinkings." The officer ignores the tone. American emergency construction continues. Standard cargo types. Large output. This does not change our duty. Duty. The word hangs like iron. For years, tonnage had been the measure. Sink enough, and Britain would buckle. But now, in rooms like this, commanders are being forced to confront a brutal calculation. Sinkings are no longer enough by themselves if the enemy's shipyards outrun the torpedo ledger. Brenner hears fragments from other captains as the briefing breaks into smaller discussions. Convoy escorts with new sets picked us up at night in rain. Aircraft over the gap, not as safe as before. Freighters are all the same now. One stack. Same lines. You sink one and another appears. Liberties. Always that word. In a corner near the coffee urn, Brenner shares a cigarette with Kapitän Lieutenant Otto Weiss, who commands another Type 7 and has just come in from the mid-Atlantic. Weiss exhales smoke toward the ceiling. We hit 3 ships in 2 nights. 3. Good shots. Fine work. He laughs once. Without humor. And what did it change? Brenner says. The escorts were on us in minutes. Exactly. Weiss glances toward the map room doors. You know what I saw before they drove us under another convoy line on the horizon? Another one. Like a train schedule. Brenner nods. Neither man says the next part out loud. Germany cannot do what America is doing. Germany can build submarines. Yes. It can innovate. It can fight hard. And its U-boat crews remain dangerous. But the Liberty ship phenomenon is not only about shipyards. It is about steel supply. Labor pool. Rail networks. Fuel. Machine tools. Coastal yards. Protected industrial depth. And a naval escort system increasingly synchronized with that output. It is a whole war machine. Not a single ship type. A messenger arrives with updated routing packets. The next patrols are already being assigned. No rest. No long recovery. Brenner takes his envelope and steps aside to read the grid. North Atlantic again. Convoy lane is. Same weather. Same hunt. As he folds the paper, a young lieutenant, newly assigned to his flotilla, approaches, face unlined. Uniform too clean. Confidence not yet worn down by depth charges. Herr Oberleutnant. The younger man says, Is it true what they say about those American ships, that they build one in days? Brenner looks at him for a moment. He could laugh it off, call it propaganda, tell him to focus on torpedo angles and discipline. Instead, he says, it is true enough. The young officer waits, expecting more. Brenner gives it to him. They are not better ships. They are not faster ships. But there are many. And there will be more. The lieutenant shifts uneasily. Then we sink more. Yes, Brenner says, we sink more. It is the correct answer, the only answer available. But later, walking alone through the cavernous bunker corridor toward the quay, Brenner hears the sea outside and thinks about what sink more now means. More patrols, more nights on the surface, under radar threat, more crews not returning, more reports that read as successes while the strategic balance slips away by inches. At the quay, his boat sits low and dark against the concrete wall. Streaked with rust and salt, dock workers are already loading provisions, bread, canned meat, spare parts, torpedoes on wheeled cradles. A mechanic curses at a valve casing. Another crew is painting over scraped metal near the bow. Routine. Always routine. Brenner climbs onto the casing and looks down at his men as they prepare for sea again. He knows their habits now. The machinist who hums under his breath before diving. The radio man who writes 1 letter each patrol and never sends it until he returns. The torpedo petty officer who touches the tube hatch before every attack like a superstition. They are not symbols. They are men inside a steel cylinder being asked to fight mathematics with courage. A dockside crane swings a torpedo into place. Steel against steel. The sound carries across the basin. For a moment, Brenner's mind flashes not to the Atlantic, but to the shipyard. He has never seen another crane. Another piece of steel swinging into place. Another Liberty hull being stitched together under American floodlights. He imagines both sounds at once, the torpedo loaded in Lorient, the hull section lowered in Richmond. That is the war now. One side loads a weapon, the other assembles another ship. As evening falls, the bunker lights glow yellow in the rain. Orders are posted. Departure times are confirmed. Engines are checked and checked again. Men smoke in silence along the quay. Brenner seals his chart case and gives the order to cast off preparations. He will go back into the Atlantic, He will attack convoys. He will do his duty. But the unwelcome truth has settled in, hard and permanent. Even if the U-boats continue to kill, the Atlantic is no longer just a battlefield. It is a race between torpedoes and factories. Autumn, 1943, North Atlantic convoy route. Eastbound lanes. The sea is iron grey by day and black glass by night, broken only by wind and convoy wakes. U-552 runs at periscope depth through cold swells, her hull creaking softly as she rises and dips beneath the surface. Inside, the air is warm, damp, and stale. Boots slide on condensation. Men speak in whispers without being told. Every sound feels amplified a valve turn. A pen scratching in the log. The faint metallic knock of a torpedo gyro being checked one last time. Carl Brenner is back on the periscope. The convoy fills his lens in fragments mastheads. Bow waves. Signal lamps. Smoke smears. Silhouettes fading in and out behind rain squalls. Escorts zigzag at the edges. Disciplined and alert. Somewhere overhead. Beyond the cloud cover. He knows there may be aircraft, even at night. No one on a U-boat assumes darkness is safety anymore. He tracks one merchantman, then another. Same blunt bow, same raised bridge, same cargo booms. Liberty ships. He does not need an identification manual now. He knows the profile by instinct. Range, he asks. The torpedo officer gives numbers. Brenner nods. Adjusts. Keeps watching. Once. These moments had felt clean, hunter and prey. Angles and nerve. A contest of skill. Now every attack carries a second layer in his mind. Not just, can I hit this ship, but what does it matter if another slides down the ways next week? It is not despair. Despair gets a commander killed. It is something colder. Recognition. He sees a signal flash from an escort and then another. The convoy is practiced. Almost mechanical. Ships hold station in heavy water. Escorts pivot in predictable arcs. The whole formation moves like a machine designed to absorb damage and continue. Brenner suddenly understands that the convoys themselves have become an extension of the shipyards. The factory is not just in America. It stretches across the Atlantic now in the escorts. The routing, the replacement hulls, the cargo schedules, the port crews waiting in Britain. Stand by, he says. His men tighten around him in the red-lit control room, faces thin from patrol weeks, eyes hard from too little sleep. They are still dangerous men, still professionals, still capable of killing ships in the dark. He gives the firing order. The torpedoes leave. The boat shudders. Men count. Brenner follows the wakes through the scope. Rain streaking across the lens. One impact. A flash. Steam and smoke. A Liberty ship lurches. Bow lifting strangely. Men are moving on deck now, tiny black shapes against flame. Scrambling toward boats, or trying to hold hoses to a wound too large to save. A second torpedo misses wide. Before the first explosion has fully died, an escort turns hard. Bow wave exploding white as it charges toward the firing point. Down, 60 meters. The boat tilts. Diving. The sea closes above them. Electric motors hum. Someone slams shut a hatchdog with a dull steel crack. Then the pings begin. Closer than Brenner wanted. The hunt is faster now, almost immediate. As if the convoy itself had reflexes. Sonar pulses strike the hull in regular beats. The sound operator murmurs contact bearings. The chief checks compartments. The torpedo men secure what they can. Sweat runs down necks despite the cold Atlantic pressing in outside. Depth charges come in pairs, then in strings. The first blasts are near enough to rattle gauges and throw dust from the overhead. A later pattern is farther off, then another. Close again. Lifting the stern and dropping it with a sickening slam. A bulb bursts. A sailor curses under his breath and clamps both hands over his mouth. Ashamed of the noise. Brenner grips the chart table and listens. He has done this too many times to mistake fear for panic. His crew is holding. The boat is holding. But as the charges walk around them in the dark water, he sees the war with painful clarity. This is no longer the Atlantic of 1941. The convoy system has teeth now. The escorts are quicker. The sky reaches farther. And behind every sinking, the American yards keep working. Hours later, after the escorts lose contact and the pings fade into open water, U-552 rises cautiously to the surface. The hatch opens to freezing air and diesel fumes. Brenner climbs to the bridge and scans the horizon under torn cloud. Far off, there is a glow. At first he thinks it is lightning. Then he realizes it is the dying ship, the Liberty they struck, still burning low on the water. A smudge of orange in the Atlantic night. No cheers come from his crew. They have won the tactical moment. They hit the convoy, survived the counterattack, and lived to report another sinking. By every old measure of the U-boat war, this is success. Brenner keeps staring at the glow. He thinks of the men in that freighter's engine room, the signalman on her bridge, the armed guard at the stern gun, the merchant sailors trying to lower boats in cold seas. War at sea is merciless to everyone. He has known that since his first patrol. Then, unbidden, the other image returns, the one he cannot shake anymore. Richmond, Baltimore, Portland, New Orleans, shipyards he has never seen, but can picture now as clearly as the convoy ahead of him. Cranes turning, welders burning seams, shift whistles in the dark, another hull plate dropping into place while this one still burns. That is the shock. Not that Liberty ships exist, not that they are simple, not even that they are many. It is that they keep reappearing because the Allies have solved the deeper problem of modern war, how to turn industry into endurance. Brenner lowers his binoculars. Below him, the watch officer asks, "Shall I note one confirmed sinking?" "Herr Kalayan." Brenner answers after a long pause. "Yes, one confirmed." The officer writes in the logbook. One line of ink in a submarine ledger, one ship gone in the Atlantic. By dawn, the convoy will still be moving west. By next month, another Liberty will take that ship's place. By next year, the Atlantic itself will belong less to the hunters and more to the side that can build, replace, and keep moving. The wind rises. Brenner gives the order to clear the bridge and resume course. U-552 turns into the dark. Diesel engines pounding steadily, bow cutting through black swells. Behind them, the burning glow fades. Ahead of them, beyond the horizon, beyond the convoy routes, beyond the reach of his torpedoes, the factories keep working. And for the first time, Carl Brenner understands that what he is fighting is no longer just ships on the ocean. He is fighting a factory horizon.